Hello everybody, and today I will be doing an introduction to the Psychic type in the Gym Leader Challenge format. So what is the Gym Leader Challenge format, or GLC for short? The main difference from Standard are these Decklist restrictions, which are that you can only have one type of Pokemon in your deck. You can only have one of each card with the same name per deck, excluding Basic Energy. Cards printed from black and white onward are legal, so it's a very wide and diverse card pool, and there are no rulebox cards such as Ace Specs, Radiant Pokemon, Prism Star Pokemon, and multi-prize Pokemon such as Pokemon EX, V-Star, or VMAX. And then I will leave the ban list for the format in the description. Psychic is a very, very supported type. It's really, really powerful. It's got plenty of draw and energy acceleration, and a big portion of its consistency can be handed to the Gardevoir and Gallade line, because Kirlia, with that refinement ability, just once during your turn, you can discard a card from your hand and draw two cards. And then the Kirlia either evolves into this Gallade with the Buddy Catch ability, which just lets you go get a supporter once during your turn. And then the Swirling Slice attack isn't bad either. For a Psychic and two colorless, you do 160, and then you move an energy from the Gallade to one of your benched Pokemon. So it can do some pretty big damage after getting you your supporters for a little bit and conserve a bit of energy. And then this Gardevoir, similar to the Pokemon Go Charizard, it doubles all of your basic psychic energy in play. So you could build around this with attackers that do more damage for each psychic energy attached to them. And it's just really nice that you have that Kirlia as a general consistency piece if you want to play Gardevoir or Gallade. And then in terms of more draw, you got Tinkaton, Gather Materials. You discard a card from your hand to draw three. And then Special Hammer does 90 for a Psychic and a Colorless, and then 90 more if the Tinkaton has any special energy attached. So it can hit for 180, and it draws you a bunch of cards. Pretty solid. And you can use your rare candy on the Tinkaton because you want to be evolving into the Kirlia to kind of get that extra bonus of refinement. Into energy acceleration, Zatu's clairvoyant sensibility. Once during your turn, you may attach a psychic energy card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, and then you draw two cards. More draw, some energy acceleration. This one's from hand, unlike the Malamar, which has the psychic recharge ability, which once during your turn you may attach a psychic energy card from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. So they are both to benched Pokemon. Zatu is from hand and lets you draw, and Malamar lets you kind of recycle the old energy that you used. More consistency, Meowstic with the Inviting Ears ability, where when you evolve it, you search your deck for up to two supporters and put them into your hand. So you can get a supporter for this turn and a supporter for next turn, kind of allow you to keep a bit of consistency ready for the next turn. And then this Banette with the Puppet Offering ability, where once during your turn, you may put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand, and then you put the Banette into the Lost Zone and discard all the attached cards. So it lets you get a supporter back from your discard pile. So if you played a supporter early on, or you discarded one that you need now, you can use the Banette to go get it. Ability lock, Psychic's got two with the Wobbuffet with the Bide Barricade, where as long as it's in the active, each Pokemon in play that isn't a Psychic type has no abilities, and this includes in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile. So this is like widespread ability lock. So like your opponent doesn't get to do anything until they remove Wobbuffet from the active. And it really doesn't affect you because it shuts off all Pokemon's abilities that aren't Psychic Pokemon. So you keep your abilities. And then Garbodor with the Garbotoxin, where as long as the Garbodor has a tool card attached to it, no Pokemon in play have abilities, and you can really, it's in play and in the discard pile and in the hand, just like the Wobbuffet. So it's really widespread ability lock, and then if your opponent can't remove the tool, you can prevent them from doing much of anything. This Cleffa with the Grasping Draw sees some play in Standard right now. 30 HP, free retreat, and then for no energy, you can draw cards until you have 7 in your hand. So it's a pivot that you can use later in the game, and it lets you draw cards early game. Smooch 'em, new card from Surging Sparks, Delightful Kiss. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Psychic Energy and attach them to one of your bench Pokemon. Really helps set up early game, especially if you don't have much else you want to be doing turn one. It again for a treat like the Cleffa, so it's still a pivot. The attack is free, so you can attach and retreat one of your one retreat cost Pokemon into the Smoochum to still use the attack. Psychic does have its own bench barrier. It is a basic in Mew with the bench barrier ability, and then Psi Power does actually do some work because it's just one colorless. Put 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. And there are some. Cleffa and Smoochum both have 30 HP, and a lot of good basic Pokemon also have 60 HP. So if you can use Psi Power and put a lot of pressure on 60 HP evolving basic Pokemon, the Mew can really put in a lot of work. This Unknown, probably one of my favorite cards in the format, with the Farewell Letter ability, where once during your turn, if the Unknown is on your bench, you can discard it and draw a card. So it just gets you that extra little bit of consistency. You can put it down and see if your opponent's going to hand disrupt you, and then wait to use the ability. And especially if you're playing a bunch of ways to recycle it, you can really get a ton of uses out of this and draw so many cards. Comfey with the flower selecting sees play in the standard iteration of Lost Box with flower selecting, where once during your turn you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you keep one and you put the other into the Lost Zone. It's not as good in Gym Leader Challenge because everything you play is a one of, so you will be getting rid of one of your cards and you will never ever be able to get it back. But it does offer that little bit of digging potential and consistency that you could be looking for. And then Dusk Noir, the plague of standard at the moment, where you can knock it out and place 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Pretty crazy. If you don't KO anything with the Dusk Noir, you can set up counter catcher plays, you can set up Lieutenant Surge plays, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. The Dusclops is good too, where you knock it out and place 5 damage counters, and that's a stage 1. So a lot of decks run both just because if you prize your rare candy, you can evolve into both of them eventually. Attackers, Psychic's got absolute lineup of attackers. Giratina's a really common one with the Distortion Door ability, where once during your turn, if the Giratina is in the discard pile, you can put it onto your bench and put 1 damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's kind of crazy. It's a attacker that can recycle itself and do extra damage, spread some damage on the board. It's just kind of ridiculous. And then Shadow Impact for 2 Psychic and a Colorless does 130 damage, and then you put 4 damage counters on one of your Pokemon, which isn't ideal, but Psychic's definitely got some ways it can play around with those damage counters. Latios, relatively new card. Luster Purge, pretty simple. 2 Psychic and a Colorless, does 180 damage, and you discard 3 energy from it. Pretty easy. Slap 3 energy on it, blow up whatever's in your opponent's active. This Mewtwo, similar idea with the Limit Break. 2 Psychic and a Colorless, 90 plus 90 if your opponent has 3 or fewer prizes remaining. So later in the game, Mewtwo will be doing 180 for 3. Necrozma with its special laser attack for 2 Psychic and a Colorless does 100 damage, and then if the Necrozma has any special energy attached, it does 60 more damage. And there are just plenty of good special energies that Gym Leader Challenge as a format has that you can kind of just throw into the deck and have Necrozma be a pretty solid attacker. Miss Magius with the Eerie Voice for 1 Psychic, put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. Pretty widespread, just placing damage counters. This does not get blocked by Manaphy or the Bench Barrier Mew, because both of those specify that they prevent damage, and this is damage counters. It's a bit confusing, yeah. And then Spiteful Magic, where if the Miss Magius has full HP and is knocked out from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So if your Miss Magius is up there and you get a couple eerie voices off, and then they finally decide to KO it, their active is going to take 8 damage counters back. So you could get a KO for free and then still come up with something else on your turn and take another KO. This Uxie, probably one of my favorite Pokemon from the Surging Sparks set, with the Painful Memories attack. For one Psychic, you put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. It's the Miss Magius' attack on a basic that you can get off of Buddy Buddy Poffin because it has 70 HP. Really, just really, really powerful in spread decks. Blacephalon with the Fireworks Bomb for a Psychic and a Colorless. You put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. And then if your opponent has exactly 3 prize cards remaining, you put 12 instead of 4. So it's Sableye, which I have right here. It's Sableye if your opponent has exactly 3 prize cards remaining. And if you can take out like 2 key attackers with the Fireworks Bomb, they might not be able to get off of the 3 prize turn, and then you could just do it again. Sableye with the Lost Mine for 1 Psychic. You can only use the attack if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone, and then you put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. Sableye is really, really powerful. Most damage spreading will be because a lot of Pokemon are going to be evolving, and if you can catch the evolving Pokemon before they evolve, you will be able to take multi-price turns with something like Lost Mine or Fireworks Bomb. Dragapult has the Infiltrator ability, where if it were to be damaged by an attack, you flip a coin, and if heads, prevent that damage. So your opponent may have to like hope and pray that they actually end up hitting the Dragapult. And then Phantom Force for 2 Psychic does 120 damage, and you place 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. So you can set up for some KOs, you can take some KOs with other spread attacks. It's just a generally pretty powerful card. Iron Boulder with the adjusted horn, where if you don't, it for a Psychic and a Colorless, it does 170 damage, or nothing if you don't have the same number of cards as your opponent in your hand. So you can completely ignore that by playing something like Judge, where both players shuffle and draw 4. Then both players have 4 in their hand, and you just use Adjusted Horn for 170. It's a pretty low energy cost attack, too. You just uh, do 170 on a basic. You can recycle it. You can recycle Judge. You have consistency with Buddy Catch. Iron Boulder is a pretty solid attacker. Clefable with the Metronome, you just, for 2 colorless, you choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. If your opponent has a threat that has been taking out a couple of your guys, you can come up, Metronome, copy the attack, and KO it. And now they have to figure out what to do. Similar thing with this Mimikyu with the Copycat, where for a Psychic and a Colorless, if your opponent's Pokemon used an attack that wasn't a GX attack during their last turn, you use it as Copycat. So Mimikyu can come up and take a big response KO. Screamtail with the Roaring Scream. This attack does 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on the Screamtail. This pairs nicely with the Giratina and turns the 4 damage counters from Shadow Impact into a positive thing, allowing you to snipe KOs later down the line. Galarian Articuno with the Cruel Charge ability. When you play it from your hand onto your bench, you can attach up to 2 Psychic Energy from your hand to the Articuno. And then Psy Laser, you discard all Psychic Energy from the Articuno and do 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Solid Snipe attack, powers up itself, not too bad overall. Another Gardevoir, just to solidify how good the Gardevoir Gallade line is. Shining Arcana, once during your turn you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic energy cards you find there. And then you attach the energy to your Pokemon in any way you like, and then you put the other cards into your hand. So it's a bit of draw, and it's a bit of energy acceleration, and then Brainwave for 3 colorless does 30 more damage for each Psychic Energy attached to the Pokemon with a base of 60. So if you just pay for the attack cost, you're doing 150. And it shouldn't be too hard with all the energy acceleration you have, especially because the Gardevoir can self-accelerate with Shining Arcana, and it can support with a bit of draw too. And then Cofagrigus, another newer card, Law of the Underworld, puts 6 damage counters on each Pokemon that has an ability. It is both yours and your opponent's, so it could really hurt your board state depending on what you're playing. But if you play like limited abilities, you can really capitalize on Law of the Underworld, like brutalizing your opponent's board. Psychic doesn't have too many specific trainer cards, but I think they're all very, very strong. Fog Crystal lets you get a basic psychic energy or a basic psychic Pokemon and put it into your hand. So, again, a bit more consistency. Mysterious Treasure, similar, bit more consistency. You discard a card from your hand, and if you do, you search your deck for a psychic or dragon Pokemon and put it into your hand. And this does not specify basic psychic Pokemon, so this can get you just any Pokemon that you need at the current moment. Tulip, put 4 in any combination of psychic Pokemon and basic psychic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. Great at recycling things like energy to attach with Xatu or the unknown to draw a couple more cards. Dimension Valley, probably one of the most broken stadiums in the format. Just each psychic Pokemon's attacks, both yours and your opponent's, cost 1 colorless less. So this turns like a lot of psychic attackers from like 2 energy and one of them being colorless to just throw the attacker down, attach an energy to it, and use the attack with the stadium in play. It can be very powerful, allowing you to commit your energy elsewhere. Old Cemetery, whenever any player attaches a energy card from their hand to one of their non-psychic Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. As the psychic player, this will not affect you at all, but if you're playing against a deck that has energy acceleration from hand, like a Rain Dance style, where they can attach as many as they like from their hand, this will really, really hurt them if they can't find a stadium bump, because every time they attach using the ability, it does come from hand, so they still put the 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And then Spell Tag, when the psychic Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, you get to put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. Really supporting Psychic Spread, could possibly take some return KOs. If you put this on something and you barely whiff a KO, your opponent knocks it out, and then you Spell Tag, put damage counters where you need to take the knockout. So getting into deck lists, we have Tinkaton Gardevoir. Focuses on consistency and good solid attackers. The Gallade, Buddy Catch, and Tinkaton gather materials. You can basically get whatever you want out of your deck, and gather materials can draw you a bunch of cards to find what you need on a given turn. It only plays the Malamar with the Psychic Recharge because you have both Refinement and Gather Materials, so you will probably be able to discard some Psychic Energy throughout the game, and then Psychic Recharge, put them back into play. And it plays the Mewtwo and the Necrozma to have powerful attackers that don't require too much energy. This list does play Dimension Valley because most attackers have a colorless in their energy cost, and it's why would you not just play a stadium that lets your Tinkaton do 180 for 1 energy? Like, it's I cannot stress enough how crazy that stadium can be. And a lot of decks also play Lusamine, which lets you put 2 in any combination of supporters and stadium cards back into your hand from your discard pile. So you can get Dimension Valley back. So you can use it again after your opponent removes it from play. This is Combo Psychic. The deck is sort of built on the premise of having a bunch of different options that you can take on a given turn. It relies on this Giratina with the Distortion Door to place damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon when it comes back from the discard pile, and that ability allows you to kind of reuse the Giratina and get multiple attacks out of it. And you use the 4 damage counters that you place on one of your Pokemon from Shadow Impact to boost the damage of the Scream Tail's Roaring Scream attack. So you can turn the downside of Shadow Impact into an upside in the form of another attacker. The reason why I enjoy this deck so much is the Natu play, because this Natu has the plus Ancient trait, which basically when the Natu takes a KO, you get an extra prize card. Now, the Natu with the Psywave attack really isn't going to be taking any KOs by itself. It kind of needs a bit of support. You can do so by attaching to the Natu with the Zatu's ability and then using Devolution Spray to pick the Zatu up into your hand. Now you have the Natu on the board with an energy on it. You can attach for turn and put Dimension Valley in play, and then with Technical Machine Blindside attached to the Natu, you have a 100 damage snipe that you can do to any of your opponent's Pokemon with any damage counters on them, and you get 2 prizes if you KO something. And Giratina can be placing damage counters on your opponent's board throughout the game. So you can come in and take your last 2 prizes with Natu if your opponent's not expecting it, and that can be a really crazy way to close out a game. This deck also, this deck list specifically, is a bit older, as it does still have the Let Loose Marshadow, which is banned now. So I talked to the creator of the list, and they said they would just swap it out for a Judge, which is both players shuffle draw 4. This is Psychic Spread. The new Cofagrigus, like I said, it can be absolutely brutal if you can mitigate the amount of abilities on your board. And then Dusknoir with the Sinister Hand lets you move 1 damage counter from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one of their Pokemon as often as you like. So you can toy with damage counters on your opponent's side of the field as often as you like during your turn. You can take KOs. You can hold off on taking KOs. You can take multiple KOs at the same time. You can sequence your KOs to activate something like Counter Catcher, and the Dusknoir is also a really cool card. And then you just play spread attackers like Giratina and this Blacephalon to really throw a bunch of damage counters at your opponent's board. And then this Monkey Dory with the Adrenabrine, where if it has any dark energy attached to it, you may move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you turn the Law of the Underworld. It will hit the Monkey Dory because it has an ability, but then you can throw half of those damage counters back at your opponent and move them around however you want with Sinister Hand. So you can really build up some crazy plays on your opponent's board state. This is my personal favorite Psychic deck, Lost Zone, where you use the Comfey and the Colress's Experiment to put a bunch of cards in the Lost Zone, and then you keep recycling Sableye over and over again until you take all 6 prizes. This deck can get through it like really, really quickly with Pokestop. Colress's Experiment sees 5, Pokestop sees 3, cards like Trekking Shoes, Acrobike let you dig even deeper, Trainer's Mail. You can just go through your deck really, really fast and get the key pieces that you need. The Banette comes in here because it puts itself into the Lost Zone to get back Colress's Experiment. So if you put Banette into the Lost Zone to get back Colress, and then you play Colress, you just put 4 cards in the Lost Zone without using Flower Selecting, without using Lost Vacuum. There's Lost Blender too, which lets you put 2 cards from your hand into the Lost Zone and then you draw a card. There are just so many ways to put cards into the Lost Zone, and this is a really fun deck. Finally, we have Garbotoxin. Garbotoxin relies on having Pokemon that don't necessarily need their abilities to attack, and most of the attackers don't even have abilities, but you want to have Garbotoxin active for as much of the game as possible to just try and completely shut down whatever your opponent's trying to do. Cleffa's in here, and Smoochum, because they both have free retreat and a free attack, and energy acceleration. You basically cannot play any Pokemon with energy acceleration in the deck because they would all have abilities and then they'd get shut off by Garbodor. So you want to play, or you want to commit your energy elsewhere, which is why something like Cleffa and Smoochum are so powerful with their free attacks. Wobbuffet comes in here as an early game ability lock, so you can kind of sit behind the Wobbuffet until you get your Garbodor up, and then you can sit behind your Garbodor while you slowly start attacking your opponent's board, and if they can't do anything, it's just kind of GG's. Thanks for watching. I'll leave all the deck lists shown in the video in the description. I will leave a link to the official Gym Leader Challenge website and the ban list, and then I'll leave a link to the Cardboard Warriors website where you can view other deck lists and even create your own. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to support me, and I'll have some more videos up soon.